The exact same things that caused the fall of the Roman Empire are happening right now in America. There's civil war, barbarian immigration, paying people who don't work, you versus the government, how things have actually been failing for a while, a Christian nation falling and them wondering why God didn't save them, and of course the most important part, how you and I as citizens can avoid the fall of an empire. Let's jump into the first point of how civil war was actually just a distraction from the truth that was going on behind the scenes. Invasions were not the only problem faced by the Western Empire. It was also badly affected during parts of the 5th century by civil war and social unrest. Civil War, just like the movie that you probably saw, I watched it twice, very interesting, but we currently have Republican versus Democrat. No independents can run. It's one side or the other, fighting at each other's throats constantly, all the time. Meanwhile, we have open borders and millions of immigrants coming across the country. No background checks. We don't know who these people are. We don't know what they have done in other countries. 100%, not all of them are bad. That is not what I'm saying. But we don't know, and that's the problem. Because one bad apple ruins the whole bunch. There ought to be many bad people that are coming through and taking advantage and being able to get into our system. It is not difficult to show how these civil wars damaged Roman attempts to control the Germanic incursions. The Germanic people were the barbarians. Continuing with immigration, during this time in Rome, they were accommodating and paying the immigrants, the barbarians, much like we are doing today, literally right now, in sanctuary states and sanctuary cities. Listen to this. Instead of continuing the endless struggle to keep them out, the Romans decided to accommodate them into the empire by an ingenious and effective arrangement. I believe that was satire. The newcomers were granted a proportion of the tax revenues of the Roman state and the right to settle within the imperial frontiers. The empire had better things to do than engage in ceaseless, sterile effort to exclude foreigners for whom it could find useful employment. Once again, giving your tax money to people who are not even citizens, who did not get here legally. If they came through here legally, no problem. They went through the system. I know many of people who it took years and years and years to get through here legally and to become a citizen. And these people are just coming through. We don't know who they are. We don't know their background. We don't know what they have done in other countries. Unfortunately, that is the way that we do have to look at it. Rome did fall, but only because it had voluntarily delegated away its own power, not because it had successfully been invaded. It happened slowly and silently, has been happening for years. Look at all of the military-aged males from other countries that are coming across the border. And unfortunately, I do believe that that is for a reason, and it's for that reason that you need to understand what is going on so you can be prepared for yourself and for your family. And now what better topic to move on to with homeless people and government employees who don't contribute to society. Under the wonderful heading, Idle Mouths, Jones lambasted the economically unproductive citizens of the late empire, aristocrats, civil servants, and churchmen. The Christian church imposed a new class of idle mouths on the resources of the empire. A large number lived on the alms of the peasantry, and as time went on, more and more monasteries acquired landed endowments, which enabled their inmates to devote themselves entirely to their spiritual duties. Now replace the Christian church with the government. This is saying what happened was the churchmen, the leaders of the church, were living off the money that was given to them by the lower class, by the peasantry. What happened there is exactly what is happening in the government. The government people are getting wealthy. They are allowed to trade stocks, and they have to publicly express the stock trades that they made, but they are allowed to trade stocks when they are the ones making the rules that can affect the prices of the stocks. Does anybody not think about these things of how that doesn't even make sense? They have to disclose their trades, but it's 30 to 60 days after. So they can know, they can be in the meeting, they can know that something is going to be changed, and then they can invest accordingly, and then 30 days later be like, oh yeah, I did this. That is insane. We can also relate this to people who don't contribute to society from a broader point of view as looking at the homeless population. Now, I am currently in California and I am escaping to Florida. Now, I don't have any good solutions for the homeless population, the homeless issue. So I am not saying this from a place of authority and I know all the answers. I am saying this to what we are currently doing is obviously not working and hasn't been working for years, and we keep spending millions, actually billions of taxpayer dollars on this, and something needs to be done. Part of the reason why I'm escaping California and going to Florida so that my California tax dollars do not get wasted on these homeless programs that are just lining the pockets of the people and the government and members, people who run these programs. Just to give you a number, California spent 24 billion with a B, in the past 5 years on the homelessness problem and did not even track to see if they had fixed the problem. I don't think that's real. I think that's a lie because they did track it and it wasn't working, so they decided to stop tracking it. Once again, my opinion. And think about this, if the people in charge of solving the homeless problem solved the homeless problem, they would be out of a job. It's government-run programs that are in charge of solving the homeless problem. That means they have endless taxpayer dollars, and if they figure out a way to solve the problem, they no longer have an easy job that gets paid multiple six figures. You can look up government salaries and see how much they made. I looked at some of the members on the board of the homeless. Granted, they have other jobs within the government too, but they were making multiple six figures. And we can take a look at this from the private sector as well with colleges, although the problem with colleges is that they are private, but it is not truly capitalistic because a young person cannot go out. Like when I was first starting my businesses, right? I could not go out and get a loan from the bank for $50,000, probably even $10,000 when I was 18, right? First turned 18. No way. There was no way they'd allow you to do that. However, you can go out and get a $400,000 loan for 4 years of college, no problem. Because why? Because the government is securing the loan to the banks. The bank would never take on that risk. The bank knows that that is a terrible, terrible risk to take on. So what happens? It's funded by the government, funded by your taxpayer dollars once again, and the government is spending more money than they have, which is a whole nother problem. We're not going to get into it in this video. So even in the private education sector, the DEI, which stands for diversification, equity or equality, and inclusion. So DEI staff are being hired at record numbers and compensated way too much, in my opinion, for the actual work that they're doing. Work, if you could even call it that. Just to give you an example, University of Michigan paid over $30 million to 241 DEI employees in 1 year. This raises the cost of tuition, and once again, where does that tuition come from? The government, which is what? Our taxpayer dollars. Now let's talk about you versus the government in regards to the games that they play with Social Security. In April 406, the Western government urgently needed more soldiers in order to oppose the incursion into Italy of Germanic tribesmen led by, not going to try that one, and it issued a call for new recruits. Each was offered a bounty of 10 gold solidi on joining up, but the payment of 7 of these was delayed until things had been brought to a conclusion. In other words, because the money was not immediately available. The government promises money but is not able to fulfill it. That sounds a lot like Social Security to me. The government is currently saying that it will be able to pay out 75% of the original promised benefits in 2035, but it will basically be stable after that. However, investors project that Social Security funds will be completely depleted by 2033. So who do you trust? What the government tells you or what investors tell you? If we assume that everybody is innately selfish, the government being selfish about this would be bad for you. The investors being selfish about this would actually be good for you, meaning the investors are telling the truth and the government is not telling the truth. Rome didn't just fall overnight. It had been failing for some time, much like the US and the signs that we see of everything happening in the US right now. Things have been failing for some time. The book says, the Roman Empire had always been in some danger, and had in fact almost fallen once before, during the 3rd century, when both East and West came very close to collapse. In this period, a powerful cocktail of failure against foes, foreign foes, Internal civil wars and fiscal crisis nearly destroyed the empire. In the 50 years between 235 and 284, the Romans suffered repeated defeats at the hands of the Persian and Germanic invaders. The succession of several of its provinces, a financial crisis that reduced the silver content of the coinage to almost nothing, and civil wars that reduced the average length of a emperor's reign to under 3 years. Okay, guys, so there's a lot to unpack here, but I'm going to cover it really quickly. First things first, succession of several of its provinces. So right off the bat, we obviously haven't had anybody succeed from the United States. However, there have been rumors of Texas. I believe there were some bills actually trying to get pushed through Texas government about that being a possibility. And you best believe that if something happens, some of those southern states, specifically Texas, are going to succeed. My opinion. Now, a financial crisis that reduced the silver content of the coinage to almost nothing, meaning print money, making coins, fake money. Now, I don't know entirely if their coins were pure silver or if they had diluted them, much like the US dollar, right? Coins used to be gold, silver, actual money. And if you guys don't have gold and silver, by the way, you should start buying real money instead of having fake dollars that can just be printed by the billions and trillions every single year, meaning your dollars could be worth nothing if everything goes downhill. And civil wars, which reduce the average length of an emperor's reign to under 3 years. Now, obviously, we have very short presidential cycles, 4 to 8 years. I've said this for a long time. Not much can get done in 4 years. If you see a president come in who leans one way and they start changing things, making policies, doing new things to make the country better for what they believe. And then you have someone else who's leaning more on the other side come in 4 years after that. And they start undoing the other things that the previous president did. And they start implementing their new policies. My point here is, you get it. It's back and forth. We're undoing and doing new things and then undoing and then doing new things. We don't ever get anything done. That's why you see the countries in power who have quote unquote dictators, who have monarchs, who have these ruling classes who run everything. Doesn't mean everything that they're doing is good, but they are actually getting stuff done. Whereas in America, I feel like we are just so back and forth and fighting with each other and undoing stuff and then doing it our way and then undoing theirs and then doing it our way. I feel like we're not getting anywhere. We're not really getting much done. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. And, maybe sometimes it lasts more than 4 years, but that's kind of what happens. A Christian nation falls and wonders why God did not save them. Unsurprisingly, the defeats and disasters of the first half of the 5th century shocked the Roman world. This reaction can be charted most fully in the perplexed response of Christian writers to some obvious and awkward questions. Why had God, so soon after the suppression of the public pagan cults, unleashed the scourge of barbarians on a Christian empire, and why did the horrors of invasion afflict the just as harshly as they did the unjust? Now that is a loaded paragraph right there, and I want to give you guys one example to explain it, and then we're going to move on because I don't want to stick on this too much. So the example that I want to give is I actually just started the book of 2 Samuel, but I have been going through the entire Old Testament, obviously started in Genesis. I'm at 2 Samuel right now. For the last couple books, they have all been Israel fighting with other civilizations. And if you read through it, you will see that God helps them conquer, a lot of times by incredible odds, right? 300, 600, taking on thousands and thousands, tens of thousands. And he also allows them to be conquered. It's this crazy cycle that repeats, but there's a reason behind it. There's an explanation behind it. And I believe the same thing happened in Rome, and the same thing is happening in America right now. They follow God, then God helps them conquer civilizations that worship false gods. Then they start to get too cocky and full of themselves, and they turn away from God to worship false idols. Then God allows them to be conquered and sometimes even enslaved by the civilizations who worship false gods. Then they whine and complain, and God raises up a leader who brings them back to God, and then they start conquering again. And this cycle repeats over and over and over and over again. It is crazy. So I want you to think about how America was founded as a God-fearing nation and where we are now. Look at how far we've come down the wrong path. And I want you to think about that while I read this. Rather than depict the barbarians as mindless instruments of God, faceless scourges like the Assyrians or Philistines of old, he argued that their success was also due to their own virtue. We enjoy immodest behavior. The Goths detest it. We avoid purity. They love it. Fornication is considered by them a crime and a danger. We honor it. This was an ingenious attempt to argue for the fall of the West as doubly just. The wicked Romans are punished, and the virtuous Germanic invaders are rewarded. So continuing with what I said, think about how far down the bad path the West has come and how people are starting to leave America in search of older traditional values. You see people going to other countries to try to find spouses and seeing people in search of traditional values because of how horrible the West has come in regards to their values, like what was just discussed. Now the part that we've all been waiting for, how do we as citizens avoid the fall of our empire? Well, there's some simple solutions to this, so let's see what the book says, and then I'll give you my 2 cents. As we have seen, the revolts by the Bakude, in the West can partly be understood as an attempt by desperate provincials to defend themselves after the central government had failed to protect them. Roman civilians had to relearn the arts of war in this period, and slowly they did so. Relearning the arts of war. First thing, remember that. But for most of the West, the remilitarization of society came too late. When they say the West here, they mean the western part of the Roman Empire. Interestingly, the most successful resistance to the German invasion was in fact offered by the least Romanized areas of the empire. It seems that it was in these backward parts of the empire that people found it the easiest to reestablish tribal structures and effective military resistance. Sophistication and specialization, characteristic of most of the Roman world, were fine as long as they worked. Romans bought their pots from professional potters and bought their defense from professional soldiers. They got a quality product much better than if they had to do their soldiering and potting themselves. However, when disaster struck and there were no more trained soldiers and no more expert potters around, the general population lacked the skills and structures needed to create alternative military and economic systems. In these circumstances, in fact, it was better to be a little backward. That tells me that you need to learn the skills that are important to survive, first of all, and secondly, to thrive, right? They could live without clay pots, but they would be surviving, right? You might have to go down to the river to drink all the time rather than having it in a pot, rather than having it available to drink right then and there. So once again, you need to learn these skills. You need to learn how to take care of yourself. You need to learn how to defend yourself. You need to learn how to fight. You need to learn how to use pew-pews. You need to learn these skills because they are essential to your survival and also you thriving. If you're new here, you want to hear more about my experiences and lessons that I've learned in growing a multiple six-figure online business, natural health, traditional values, all that good stuff. If you're into that, make sure to subscribe, and I will see you tomorrow.